We should be live. Fantastic. Okay. So I now know that we are live. So let's go tweet about it and let everybody know that we're live. So how's everybody doing today on this fine Sunday afternoon? Except for everybody living in Arizona who's not suffering from the wonderful effects of our daylight savings time. I absolutely love knowing that it's 2 o'clock in the morning and then it magically becomes 3 a.m. I love how that works. Knowing I'm not getting any sleep anyway that night, so I might as well be up watching TV. I've started recently watching AMC's Turn, America's Spies. It's been very much enjoyable. Hello, everybody. Hesh, nice to see you. Dan, thanks for stopping by. It's nice to see everybody here. I hope everyone's Sunday is going well. I was just complaining about daylight savings time and how it magically becomes 3 a.m. in just the snap of a finger. So, but that's life, right? Here we are. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, just like that. So it'll be fun going to work bright and early and tomorrow knowing that the day is lost an hour of sleep. But hello, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. Greatly appreciate it. I figured that this would be a fun little stream about just catching up, talking about what's going on, and some of the appearances I'll be making on some other streams later this week. I tried rewatching shows from the 90s. I couldn't stomach the propaganda. So, it gets really noticeable if you start to rewatch a lot of older TV shows, how absolutely messed up things get. I think the most popular example I can think of off the top of my head, I think, are Friends and Roseanne. Roseanne starts off as this really incredibly mundane, run-of-the-mill sort of middle America lifestyle show, and then virtually every character gets paused in some form or fashion. And then Friends, of course, is the same way. Rachel, gets to be encouraged to be a single mom. Let's not get married, which, they try and dance and skirt around that because they have Joey and Ross try and propose in different episodes. And of course, the show starts off with Ross, right? Not even, getting a divorce because his wife's a lesbian and they have a gay wedding on the TV show. So, it gets really noticeable when you look back and watch some of that stuff. But when you're younger and you grow up, it's not nearly as noticeable. But yeah, TV is really hard to find anything that's enjoyable these days. Although there's a couple of nuggets out there. I like Frasier. I love Frasier. Frasier is my go-to. If I'm going to turn on the TV and have something on as background noise, Frasier is my go-to. I think I've seen all 11 seasons, and I'm not proud of admitting this, at least 2 or 3 times fully in their entirety. And I don't even like the show more so for Frasier, although I love Kelsey Grammer as an actor. I think that David Hyde Pierce takes it away as Niles. I think I enjoy his character a lot more than I do Frasier, because they're just both these bumbling upper-class idiots that come from this working-class stiff of a dad. And it's just thoroughly enjoyable to watch. And what's even more funny, right, is that Kelsey Grammer's really conservative. And it's just absolutely enjoyable. You'd think sitcoms were the hives of scum and villainy, but even Stargate was full of it. Oh, really, Hessian? I kind of want to know your position as to why you think Stargate was full of it, and I really enjoy the show. They're bringing back Frasier, are they now? I know that Kelsey Grammer's been trying to do a reboot of the show forever. So I'd be really interested to see what that looks like. Are they all going to come back in the wake of Marty Crane, the actor who died, John Mahoney? and just sort of open it there with his funeral. That would be kind of depressing. That'd be probably a good way to kickstart it. And now that no one's on the radio, Frasier tries to bring back his pop psychology career by doing a podcast or trying to do a YouTube channel and, subscribe to Dr. Frasier Crane's Patreon. He was this thing back in the 90s. In retrospect, Stargate seems very universalist. Yes. Stargate was very universalist, but it was also like really oddly, I think, in that part of television that became sort of this post and, TV shows that started before 9/11 and then happened afterwards. And the shows that I think that really are exhibiting of this are Star Trek Enterprise and Stargate, because you have these TV shows that start prior to 9/11, but then they sort of turn into this raw American Western universalism kind of ideal. Like I can remember episodes of Stargate where General Hammond is like, it is not the policy of the United States government to interfere in another government's affairs or country like that, despite the fact that just a few short seasons later, the United States and the real world is invaded two Middle Eastern countries under dubious circumstances. And then, of course, Star Trek Enterprise, right? We have Space 9/11 because we have to, Star Trek has always been a show about, ongoing American politics. And so we have to go fucking kill half of Florida with the Xindi arc of the entire third season. So, I mean, Stargate, Star Trek, incredibly universalist, although I like Stargate because Richard Dean Anderson fucking sells it for me. You can't beat that. Jonathan says DS9 was better than Enterprise. Yep, DS9 is my favorite Star Trek episode of the Star Trek series of the Rick Berman era. It's far more serialized. It's not just monster or alien of the week. They kind of do that for the first 3 seasons, and then we introduce the Dominion and the Jem'Hadar, and then it's just that whole long series arc stuff is wonderful. But Prudentialists, do we need a reason to level Middle Eastern countries? Unfortunately, I mean, no, not really. Unfortunately, with how our government works, that's the case. Not to mention that in Stargate, there wasn't a single alien power minus the Asgard that the SGC didn't go to war with. Pretty much. That's how it works, right? And even then, right, with the Asgard, it's just like we didn't go to war with them, but we almost did because you had all that. What were they called? The DIA or whatever, who were stealing tech, and they pissed off virtually every other alien government in the area, and they had to give all that tech back. And then, of course, you have the replicators, which is a really neat idea, I think, in practice. Although now I have to go read all the books because Jack Posobiec's tweeting about them, and I'm like, oh, well, I should probably go look them up. And yeah, everyone does like MacGyver. It's probably why I like Richard Dean Anderson so much. That was my first exposure to him as an actor, was episodes of MacGyver, because that's what my dad grew up watching. Not to give away my age here, but you already know that I'm in my mid-20s anyway. But yeah, that's television. And I've been, like I started off, I've been rewatching AMC's Turn. America Spies is the subtitle, which is really enjoyable, despite the fact that they butcher the characterization of a lot of the historical characters. And they're like Captain Simcoe in the AMC show is this like bloodthirsty, maniacal, meticulous sort of sociopath who enjoys killing for the sake of killing and will like not stop to get his revenge, despite the fact that in reality he's a mild-mannered military man who advocates for abolition. So like, but I mean, it's really good. It's unfortunate that it gets rushed in the 4th season because, cancellation and AMC, but the writers, whoever works for AMC, I'm continuously impressed by their ability to put out incredibly well-written villains. I think that's just the nature of if you have to work for an AMC television show, you have to be a top-notch writer. I thoroughly enjoyed *Halt and Catch Fire*. *Mad Men* is one of my all-time favorite TV shows. And *Hell on Wheels* is incredibly good. The Swede from *Hell on Wheels* I think is one of the best written villains in recent modern TV history. X-Files is the best science fiction of the 90s. Absolutely. It's really good until Agent John Doggett gets up there, and then they kind of don't know what to do with it for the last 3 seasons. GG Hack says, watching Das Boot, the sub scenes are awesome. Turn was excellent. Yeah, Turn was pretty good. I've been rewatching it lately. I have been on this string of rewatching a bunch of old war movies for the last, I want to say, 4 weeks now. It's just anytime I get off work or during my weekends, I've just been watching war movies back to back to back. I watched Gettysburg, Gods and Generals. I've watched Charlie Wilson's War, A Bridge Too Far, Bridge on the River Kwai. Like, it has just been a laundry list of sort of these classic and up-and-coming war movies. Although last night I deviated from that and I watched The Prestige with my father, who had never seen it. So it was really enjoyable to have him try and figure out what the twist was of Borden having a twin. It was thoroughly enjoyable. Tequila Warlord says Crimson Tide is the best submarine movie ever made. I haven't seen Crimson Tide, although I'm just going to be a bit of a persnickety person and just say Down Periscope is the best submarine movie ever made. 1, because it's a comedy. 2, because it has Kelsey Grammer. And 3, the slapstick still stands to this day. Do I like Apocalypse Now? I've seen it, I think, twice, not anytime recently. I don't have a negative opinion of it. It's an okay movie. I mean, it's essentially, let's take Heart of Darkness and put it in Vietnam. It's okay. I think there are better Vietnam movies made. I think We Were Soldiers is arguably one of the better Vietnam movies that are in recent memory. Mel Gibson and Sam Elliott can do no wrong, in my personal opinion. And then, oh, and Jonathan, I have something for you since you asked about it the other day. There you go. There is your frog. You asked for it. There it is. Full Metal Jacket, also one of the best ones. And it's kind of funny to think, aside for Lee R. Ermey, most of the actors of that film, I can't remember being in anything else, except Vincent D'Onofrio now has been the star of one of those Law and Order shows for the last, 15, 20 years now. I mean, man, you get a Law and Order TV show going, and you're set for life. That's why Mariska Hargitay is never going to do anything else, because despite the fact that she's in her late 50s and that makeup ain't helping cover up her face anymore, she's still the lead of that show. And don't you worry, Jonathan, I've got more frogs. It's just not just this one. So I'll have more up in a second. But yeah, so I thought that this would be a fun time to just sort of chat with all of you and then bounce some ideas off of what's been on my mind and thinking about stuff. I didn't do a Monday morning musings this week. I've been trying to balance out how on earth this new job I'm in is going. It's a full-time job, and the commute is pretty hefty. I mean, it's not bad. It's about a 45-minute commute from where I live, which in comparison of living and dealing with the cities of El Paso traffic, it's really not that bad considering I'm on open highway. I can go 75 miles an hour and just get home. It's about an even 45 minutes, but thankfully they are allowing us to work from home. And now that I'm sort of getting into the routine of the job, I'm going to start taking advantage of that this week, because with gas going up to, $3 a fucking gallon, it's going to be a little bit pricey for, dealing with the commute. But other than that, it's fine. I think I've finally figured out how I'm going to manage both the channel and live stream appearances and things like that. And thankfully, working from home gives me that opportunity. So I'm going to transition now to sort of talking about that. I'll be making 2 appearances this week on 2 different channels. So this Tuesday, the 16th, noon my time, so noon CST, I'll be on with Conscious Caracol's channel, and we'll be just sort of chatting about a variety of things, mainly sort of the concern about not taking the black pill, and sort of just, the importance of community building alternative institutions. I've gotten to learn a lot from him and the AfriForum guys, so hearing about all the work that they're doing despite what feels like a totally hopeless situation, right, with what's going on in South Africa, the fact that these guys are fighting And the fact that these guys are doing so much good work, I think, provides us an excellent example of what needs to be done here in the U.S. So it'll be a nice conversation, sort of just talking about, I think the title of the stream is called The Triumph of Good and Evil. So just talking about what works, what doesn't work, and why it's important for you all not to be discouraged and to not fall into that pit of, atomized modernity. So that's the first appearance, and that's this Tuesday at noon, and it'll be on his channel. On the 18th, I will be with Mr. A.M., Apollistic Majesty. I'm pretty sure I just butchered that. I can never pronounce that word correctly. And we will be doing a debate. And I'm so excited because it is going to be a debate about whether or not the American Revolution was a mistake. And myself and a gentleman by the name of Simon Penrose will be taking the position that it wasn't a mistake, that the revolution's course of actions by the Americans was justified. So it'll be a bunch of sort of like right-wing reactionaries debating about whether or not the revolution was reactionary or not, and I think that'll be fun. And we have it structured very much like a college-style policy CX debate. So as someone who used to do that kind of stuff, I'm kind of excited that I get to flex my old polemic muscles and get to argue with people. And it'll be fun because it's an actual structured, formalized debate with an actual resolution and terms of how the debate will be done. There's a structure of like 8-minute constructives, 3-minute cross-examination periods, 8-minute, counter-constructives. It'll be great because most internet blood sports are terrible at structure, cross-examination, and actually doing the point of the debate itself, which is arguing the fucking resolution. So, I mean, it's all for good show, and I think it'll be a fun question to sort of just interrogate things, because, I mean, like Pedro asks, like, what's the point of debating people that have no power? I mean, I think it's the same reason why I did it for like 8 years competitively. Like, I had no power. The people I was debating had no power. You do it for entertainment. You do it to flex your skills, and it's a great way to, show off your sort of some of the arguments and what you can do. The problem is that you can't defend the resolution without inherently defending the Enlightenment. Well, so I'm taking a fun position to sort of give you a preview, and I know that I don't think my opposition is going to be watching this stream, but if they are, I don't care because I can defend it. So I'm sort of taking the position of Edmund Burke's concept of inherited rights. So the inherited rights of the people of the colonies, of course, are being infringed upon. Everyone has the right to ensure that the social contract of the colonies, right, is being infringed upon by the crown, both through taxation and of course through the corruption of the various states that were in there. You can take a look at the war of regulation that happened in the Carolinas. DC perspective should be well familiar with the state's history to know about that. And so these people are taking actually a reactionary position to defend the rights of their, posterity. I mean, it's not like everything. I mean, I'll shit on Rousseau any day of the week, but it's not like every single thing that has come out of the Enlightenment is inherently evil or wrong. But I mean, that's a conversation for a much later time. But I mean, it'll be a fun debate, and it'll be a fun time to make an appearance and talk with other like-minded people and have a good conversation. And as Mr. Majesty has asked for it, he wants it to be a flowy kind of showmanship debate. So I will try my best to be as flowery in my language and as to get as my Margaret Thatcher-esque jabs in with everybody. It'll be a good time. But that's on this Thursday, the 18th, 3 o'clock Central Time. All right, that or 3:30, one of the two. But I will tweet about it. So we have 2 live stream appearances. I will have a Monday morning musings for you all on, it'll premiere. I'll record it after this stream. And I should have some scripted stuff. I will have some scripted stuff out, hopefully by next weekend. I'm going to have 2 things that I'm working on this week that I'll hopefully get out either by Friday or next Sunday, because next Saturday is Prudent Reads, and I'm excited to have Clossington on it. We're going to talk about Bronze Age mindset, but it'll be a fun time. And the 2 stuff that I have scripted on is, 1, I have this long overdue review of the debate that the Distributist had with Bretton Engel over democracy. I've been I've watched that thing twice. I've got my notes on it. I have sort of a script and then sort of just a play-by-play of it all, talking about the ways about debating democracy, how we should be talking about democracy, the ways that, democracy can either be improved or the ways that we criticize it, and general ways of having conversations about it. And I told Dave that I have this video out forever ago, and I haven't had the opportunity to actually finish, but I'm planning to do it this week. So that's one of my scripted videos that I plan on doing. And then the second one is talking about accelerationism. I've been doing a ton of reading on my own on Deleuze, Guattari, Nick Land. And I kind of want to compare Nick Land's view of accelerationism to that of another writer and philosopher of accelerationism, which is Paul Virilio. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I like talking about Paul Virilio because Virilio is kind of like cautious about accelerationism as well as technological and sociological advancement, because the discovery of new ideas and new concepts inevitably leads to the discovery of their accidents, which he calls the integral accident. And the funny thing is that he talks about like, oh, we're learning about genetic modification and the Human Genome Project. You'll eventually get what he calls as a genetic Hiroshima, where irreparable damage to the human DNA and gene pool will be done. And I'm like, man, I feel like we're already here with certain things that are happening that I don't want to talk about in case I get in trouble with Susan. So I'm not going to say anything. But I think you can infer quite clearly what I'm talking about. Hello, based populist. It's good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Tequila Warlord asks, have you read Sidney George Fisher's History of the Revolution? I have not, but if someone... I will absolutely take a look at that later, and I will probably order that. But yeah, it'll be a good time. And there's our second frog for the day. Sort of like how Louis Levi does his, lewd lollies on his streams. I figured that the better way to do it, and a little more wholesome, would just be frogs. After doing that thread where it was like comment for a picture of a frog, I feel like this is what I'm going to be known for, and I'm A-okay with that. That's Moldbug's recommendation, isn't it? Are we referring to Pedro's comment, or are we referring to something I had said? Frog, yes. And I'm okay with it. See, frog, they're much more wholesome than, lewd anime pictures that are on other people's streams. Your free time is split between 50-50 between collecting frogs and war movies. My free time is split like 50-50 commuting and then reading. That and fishing, because of where I live, there's a pond on the property. So I have spent a lot more of my free time fishing now that the weather's warmed up. Oh, okay. I meant History of the American Revolution. Oh, okay. Well, if that's Moldbug's recommended reading, then I'm all for getting a copy of that. The Virgin anime character versus the chat frog. That's true. I agree. The frogs are the real chads. Fishing is peaceful, and that's what I spent like at least 4 hours yesterday doing, but right before I started recording my yesterday's video, was I was just out there fishing, and I didn't catch anything today, which is unfortunate because, just last weekend I had caught quite a few smallmouth bass that we'd thrown back in. Very much catch and release. But, I could spend all day fishing. I fucking love it. And in the pond that I have is small enough where like a cheap Zebco 33 and some like beetle spins is all that you need to catch anything. It's better than therapy. Better than therapy. Men would rather spend all day trying to go fishing than they would go to therapy. And I love that meme because, one, I think therapy is relatively overrated. Two, the things that you can get out of therapy, you can find in other ways, like going to church, talking to your friends and family, going fishing, walking through the woods. That's what I do. Have you read the the Jefferson Davis's work on the Confederate government. I mean, it's a hell of a read. Pager, I think that if you're going to be taking a look at the Confederacy, that might be a good place to start. Philip Carlson says, strange for an American to have such a love for the French, calling them wholesome and better than animals. Is someone who they're not wholesome, though. That's the problem. Is that I grew up overseas due to my father's military career, and the times that I've been to France, visited Paris, and other places. Whether we visited a lot of World War I sites, Lorraine, Verdun, a lot of places in Alsace-Lorraine, and just I cannot begin to express how much I have a dislike for the French people. Not my cup of tea. They're you reek of tobacco and you have no manners. But maybe this is the fact that I'm, white and with an Anglo background, and I'm just like, these are not good people. The French made cuties. France is just the Japan of Europe. But my, I before I go hashtag not all French, keep in mind that cuties was made by like an immigrant to France, not necessarily a French person. But then again, all the French postmodernists, like Foucault and others, advocated for the abolition and the elimination of the age of consent laws in the state. So it's not like France is, the bastion of any sort of conservatism, although French conservatism has its values. Come on, show some love for our amphibian brothers. They're still salty over Arkan Course. I think they're still salty over the fact that, an entire legion of just English peasants with longbows decided to kill off half the French nobility. Fritz Imperial versus the Distributists, the eternal divide between the weebs and the Puritans. I really don't. So, who said it that the reactionary community is far too invested with anime? I've never been an anime fan. My best friend, who is far more normie conservative than I am, he's a good, hardworking Hispanic family man who's marrying into like the whitest family possible, which is kind of funny. But he's a Hispanic man who has developed an allergy to capsaicin, which to me is the ultimate irony. That it's probably good that he's marrying into a white family because then the food won't be spicy. But he is a big weeb, and I love him to death. But he has tried since high school to get me into anime, and I've watched a few things with him. I've seen a few Studio Ghibli films. I've watched a couple of episodes of Attack on Titan. It's just not my cup of tea. I mean, I can appreciate the artwork and the effort that goes into the studios and animation styles, but it's just like, it's not my thing. I think that, as I said in my I have not yet begun video, you can have vices. You can enjoy your vices. Don't let them become, your master, as G.K. Chesterton has said in the past. A man has as many masters as he does vices. But, you can enjoy things. I certainly have my own guilty pleasures. But, I mean, I personally don't care that, the reactionary community has a bunch of weebs or anime profile pictures. To me, it's not hurting anybody. It probably hurts us optically that, look at all these right-wing anime profile pictures on Twitter that are shit posting, and it's they're not hurting anybody. But I think that the debate really boils down to how trad you want to be. And even then, I think that you can try and opt for a traditionalist lifestyle, but it gets incredibly difficult to do so in a world of the internet, a world of public schools. I mean, you can homeschool your kids, but I think if you're going to homeschool, you need to do your best to ensure that these kids have healthy social lives. Because I think that's always been the biggest drawback. And I think that's also a social meme, that society puts on, is that, if you homeschool your kids, they're going to be autistic social retards. And it's no, they're not. Because if you're a good fucking parent, they're going to interact with other kids. You're going to put them in clubs. You're going to put them in sports. You're not going to just drag them away from the rest of the world. But every time that we talk about homeschooling, you sort of get that fucking opening to Mean Girls where it's and then God on the seventh day rested and invented the Remington so he could hunt the dinosaurs and homosexuals, which, one, based, Two, like no one really thinks like that. And the homeschooling community is going to be filled with more people like, frickin' Radical Liberation, who is the ultimate Chad of, successful life, has land, has 8 kids, and a wife that homeschools them all. Like that's the goal. That's the real traditionalist lifestyle. And that man's on the internet and he talks about economics and he got to talk about memes and tweets about Boobo with fucking saffron. That's the life. So you can have a traditionalist lifestyle, but still enjoy, I think, some of the more cozy comforts of modernity. Like, I think that's how it is. Tactical Droid says, I do not like the fact that anime cannot portray subtle emotions. Every character has to literally scream out what they think. As such, you cannot make profound stories with it. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's always been my biggest gripe with it, right? Is because there's no subtlety. Like, it's hard to portray deception or even more subtle aspects of emotion, guilt, melancholy, etc. Because you're right, everything has to be over-exaggerated. Everyone's got to cry their eyes out. Everyone's got to scream. Everyone's got to have a giant 5-foot sword, even though the character's like 5'2". So, I mean, that's my issue. Tequila Warlord says the only sane and salvageable women I have ever met were homeschooled. I haven't met any homeschooled women, but maybe that's where I need to start hunting, is just finding young women at my church. But I wish there were young women at my church, but oh well. As an autistic social retard who was homeschooled, I'm a big fan of it. Well, there you go. Try talking about homeschooling in Sweden. It's illegal here, and no one gets the problem with that. I can't... yikes. I can't imagine that. I don't I mean, I get it, right? Because with different social cohesion, people are okay with the state. Just, I can't believe that you don't even have the choice. Tech question. What's my operating system of choice? So I am not a techie guy at all. So yeah, I'm going to disappoint you with my tech question. I am your very basic bitch Microsoft operating system. I know I need to learn to code. I need to learn how to use Linux and all that other stuff and build my own things because I'm not that tech literate. I grew up with a very a tech like my father was very technical. Like he worked with the radio stations and TVs and computers, and he was very mechanical, hands-on. And so like with a lot of children, we sort of go away from our parents. I was not very mechanically inclined. I'm still not to this day. But the older I've gotten, I'm like, oh, these skills are kind of fucking important to know. So things like, auto mechanic maintenance, which I've spent the last several years getting more acquainted with. I've definitely started, I built my own computer last summer. I mean, PCPartPicker.com was incredibly helpful because I wanted to buy a nice gaming PC, and I built it from, buying the parts. But like, I'm not as technically literate as I want to be. I would love to learn to code. I'm probably going to take some classes on it, but I wish I wasn't as tech illiterate as I am right now. What church do you go to? I remember on your birthday stream that you did not go to church, or I remember that. Well, I was at the time of the birthday stream, I started making efforts to look into churches to go to. So there are 3 churches in the area that I've been sort of regularly attending to, or at least I've gone at least a couple of times every other week or so. So every weekend it's been a different church. So I didn't go this morning just due to the fact that I had to plug in super late for dialysis. So, and then the time change happened, so I didn't get out of bed and unplug until much later in the morning. But I've attended 3 churches. I've attended a Baptist one in my area. I've attended a local Catholic church in my area, and then I've attended a local Eastern Orthodox church in my area that's actually chartered with the Eastern Orthodox Church itself. So 3 different churches, sort of getting a different feel for it all. I have been blown away by how welcoming all 3 are. I do have a certain appreciation for the Eastern Orthodox Church because I do think there's something about the divine liturgy at the beginning that's incredibly beautiful. Although the Catholic Church, I think here is a little bit bigger than the other 2 churches in the area, which is kind of surprising, but it's also in town, so that might explain why. But yeah, 3 different churches, and I kind of haven't taken the plunge on which one I'm going to go to or, pick. It has been interesting though. But yeah, I've been attending 3 different services, so it's kind of been staggered every other week. It's okay to use normie options for tech. They are the standard for a reason. Word of advice: don't stress yourself unless you know what you are doing. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I don't, but I mean, I'd like to learn. That's the thing, is that I'm getting to a point now where I'm like, oh, I need hobbies, or I need things to do, because the current hobbies that I had or have, right? Like I enjoy wargaming. I enjoy a lot of tabletop stuff. I enjoy D&D and other tabletop stuff. And but then of course COVID happened, which has been a killer on all the game shops in the area. And then with my own health problems, it's funny because they're like, well, now that you're on this at-home dialysis, you can have a life and you can go out and you can have a full-time job and you can do whatever you want. You just get to plug in at night. You're all good to go. And then it's like, cool, I can go out and do what I want. But then every other 5 minutes, I see a nurse or a doctor. They're like, hey, COVID's still a problem. Don't go out. Don't do anything unnecessarily risky. And I'm like, bitch, I go to a diner every weekend to treat myself with a cup of coffee and a nice breakfast at a local, diner that I patron. So it's like, I don't give a shit. But at the same time, it's like, it would be nice to do all these like social things again. But it's whatever. Make sure you find a church that represents and believe what you find to be true through the Bible. Yeah, it's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to find, what I think best does for me and my own faith journey, because life has been an interesting series of events. So Base Populist asks, how's my health doing? So boy, do I have a fun story for you all. So if you didn't catch my Monday morning musing about not being discouraged, I will break it down for you here, and we'll put up another frog. So it's been 3 weeks now. So 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night, I get a call at around 10:30 at night. And they're like, we've got one for you. And even better, it's because of my height and weight, I qualify for what's called N-block, which is essentially if there is a small child that unfortunately passes away, I would qualify to get both of those child's kidneys, because they're so small. They give you both of them, and then they grow into an adult-sized kidney with time. And so they're like, hey, we've got one for you. Come down to the hospital. It'll be here tomorrow morning. And I'm like, great. So this is it, right? I've only officially been on the transplant list since the beginning of January. And here we are at the end of February, and I get the call, and it's like, all right, let's go. So we book it about 90 minutes down south to Dallas, where my hospital is. We get everything set up. I haven't eaten or had any water in me for like 18 hours. It's been exhausting. They're like, we got to wait till they get here. And they so much blood work, so many other things. And this is on top of the fact that I was at the doctor's the other day for some other uncomfortable issues that I think I told Dan about. And it was just like, here we go. And then lo and behold, my surgeon, who I've been talked about, just size talks. Because of my height and weight, I qualify for N-block kidneys. So that tells you that I am a beanpole. I'm a very skinny guy. But my surgeon's there. They're like, all right, they're on their way. We're gonna get you all set up. And I'm just praying this entire time. And I tweeted about it too that day, waiting for the organs to come in. And they made it very clear that it's about, it was a small child. I think the way that she had said it was pediatric, so it was an infant. And that breaks my heart, because if heaven forbid you lose somebody in your life, you would want their organs to go on and make sure that someone else gets a chance to live. And of course, during transport, something had happened and they weren't viable. And so my surgeon comes back and says, hey, surgery's off. You can go home. And I was disappointed for about 5 seconds. And then I was like, okay, I got to get the hell home. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I haven't eaten anything for like 24 hours. Like, there'll be another time. And I'm not heartbroken or busted up about it, because literally 2 days later, I interviewed for the job that I have. I'm now employed full time, and it's all right. Everything is working out to where it should be. I just couldn't believe that that's where we were at. So to answer your question about my health, like, that's where I'm at. I do dialysis at home. Delivery's okay. Everything has been fine so far. And my health is in relatively good standard. I eat healthy. I walk, I go fishing. For all intents and purposes, you wouldn't be able to tell that anything's wrong with me. And to me, that's the best part. So that's where we're at. And have I considered growing some of my own food? Yes. I'm actually planning to take some of the land that we have next to our bee yard and turn that into a garden. I'm planning to grow some carrots and zucchini. I just have to get the necessary materials to lift up the ground and have an elevated section for land so I can have the garden. But yes, I am growing my own food. I was recording yesterday a little video of a walk through the property, just sort of talking about what's been on my mind, some of the things I've been observing, some of the things I saw on Twitter that I thought were interesting, and sort of bouncing off ideas. Farm frogs. The funny thing is that on our pond, we do have frogs. They're not your typical North American bullfrog. They're very small. They're about the size of an American penny, if not smaller. But they are, we have quite a lively ecosystem, because in Texas, if you take care of the land and you let the wildlife live on it, you can get a tax exemption for it because you're taking care of nature and whatnot. So I'm all for it. Frog farm. So what could you farm frogs for other than, say, conservation? Because now you just have me curious, because the Prudentialists frog farm would be something that you guys get like weekly video updates from, like Stick Sex and Hammer does videos of his cats. But yeah, so that's how it's been for me. But with that being said, I wouldn't grow carrots. They're too cheap store-bought to be worth it. I'd grow greens. You'll get more money worth of produce out of it. Well, I mean, I probably will. But I mean, I want to grow carrots just to say I can grow them. I think it's more of I want to do this because I want to say that I can. But yeah, I should probably be growing more greens and things that I'll actually get my money's worth out of. But I mean, seeds up here are still relatively cheap, but that's probably because I live in a farmland and all that. You farm them for frog legs and more frogs. More pictures. Oh, if there's one thing that my internet YouTube career is going to be known for, it's going to be the frogs. But yeah, no, I do plan on starting a garden, and I will be doing gardening updates. The real question, and maybe so, because our communities overlap to somewhat of a degree, for those of you who watch Morgoth's review, and his channel and his videos, I know that he does fishing videos. Does someone know how he does it? Like how he does his camera and work setup? Because I was fishing yesterday, and this was based on my conversation with Dan, was like, that would be fun to just sort of sit there and talk while I'm casting and just let you guys see if I catch anything, or just, fish in general. And we can have this nice 20-minute conversation about whatever's going on in the world. And it would just be this free flow. Let's enjoy nature. Let's enjoy fishing. But I was just thinking about it because I had my phone on me, and I was trying to cast with one hand, and then I was trying to reel it in, and I'm like, well, how the hell? Because I'm going to need a third hand to do this, that, or I'm going to need some sort of GoPro. So I guess I'm going to have to learn, how to get that to work. And I was wondering if someone knew how Morgoth does his, fishing videos, that would probably be a good way to start. Because if not, I'm just going to go out of my way and buy a fucking GoPro and strap that sucker onto my head or my arm or something. And that way we can talk, or I can have, fishing video, and then I can just record a voiceover. But yeah, a GoPro would probably be the route to take. Okay. Yeah, I'm probably going to record. I'll probably look into getting a GoPro in the next couple of weeks ahead, because it's going to get warmer and warmer. It's already 70 something degrees outside now. And I'm just going to fish, and a lot more. That's going to be my free time, is just fishing. And when I get home now with daylight savings time, it's still going to be sunny and warm outside. So, I mean, it'll be 5:45 when I get home. I'll be able to fish for an hour or two before I need to start turning on my machine and warming up the dialysis solution and getting ready for bed. It'll be perfect. So yeah, I'll probably be looking into getting a GoPro and just doing some fishing videos. Morgoth fishing with one hand like an absolute king. Well, I mean, there are multiple ways to fish. I'm doing sort of your basic bitch, like just, reel it out and throw it back in kind of deal. I think Morgoth fly fishes, but I could be wrong. It's going to be a really hot market. Will burn after the GME peaks this week. Read Nixon lore now. Can frogs do filming? Read Nixon lore now. Are we talking, do you want me to read about Richard Nixon stories? Because I could just easily link you all, the Richard Nixon tapes. I love him talking about how it's the faggiest goddamn thing he ever saw when he's talking about the Bohemian Grove. Richard Nixon is one of America's best presidents, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. But yeah, it's been let's take a look here, share screen. Let's find another frog. There we go. Have I considered buying pigs? So on the land that we have, I mean, I don't think that would work out, considering that we have a coyote problem. So I'd rather not risk buying livestock that would be difficult to keep alive. Nixon opened up China, and I'm not a fan of that. Nixon opening up China put an ideological and economic divide between communist China and the Soviet Union. Geopolitically, it was a smart strategy in realpolitik, but that's a very normie argument. No Nixon, no peace. Richard Nixon, back when we had an actual silent majority that could win elections. The pigs will eat the coyotes. I'm not sure that's how it works. Buy a rifle with a barrel inch too short and the pigs will come to you. Ain't that the truth? But the nice thing is that I have a pond, so there can be unfortunate boating accidents in case that were to ever happen. Because, SBR bans are stupid. Get a hippo like Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge is arguably America's best president when we had good government and actually did his job. And he was an absolute Chad when it came to dealing with hecklers. It's just I bet I can get you to say more than 3 words, Mr. President. And it's you lose. It's just, Calvin Coolidge should have been Chad Coolidge. He's just that great. Actually does his job. But on that note of bouncing ideas off all of you, I thought that this would be a fun time to just bounce off a couple of things that I've been thinking about and just going off on my head. So lately I was reading that there's that line in, I think, one of Moldbug's more recent essays where he's talking about how trying to infiltrate leftist language and their institutions leads to a far more militant response, because it sees it sort of as a foreign invader, ergo it responds in a very immune system kind of way. And I was bouncing this idea in this sort of Twitter thread that preservative got on to me about. And it was this conversation about okay, I'm not an accelerationist, or I'm typically not one who thinks in that frame of mind. But if you wanted to immanentize the eschaton, if you wanted to take the true NRX position of throwing sand and wrenches in the gears as to accelerate the collapse of the oligarchy, which is what we're living under, then what a better way to do that than to act like a cancer and to trigger an autoimmune response and sort of have this inverted firing squad on the pillars of what keeps the leftist ratchet turning. And I thought a really good example of that was the super straight thing. I think, Pedro, you had mentioned that on Twitter as well, was actually playing the language game and winning, because I like the super straight thing. I think it's hilarious, and I think it's actually a really good example of right-wing culture jamming that could work. And there have been other people on the right that have been talking about sort of having this sort of activist right-wing class, because the right has like really good shit posters, but we're not organized in the way that the left thinks that we are. Like, you have like your occasional bout of like 4chan troll operations, and like those are great, but it's never coordinated in a way that works with the political class that currently exists. Like, you have your share blue shills. You have people like Brooklyn Dad that got paid $60,000 in a span of like 7 months during the 2020 election cycle to shitpost on, for Democrats and to put out agitprop for the left. Which, I mean, we need that kind of activist class. And I think, believe it or not, a really good example of someone that does the game well, despite the fact that I have an issue with sometimes, is Jack Posobiec. For all his faults, Jack Posobiec is an excellent example of what the right needs in an activist class. If you had an army of 50 Jack Posobiecs who were online virtually 24/7, got paid to be online, and got paid to culture jam on issues like, the super straight thing, holy hell, imagine the damage that the right could do to the left on an institutional level, rhetorically, and even politically. Because all of a sudden, the left now has to deal with a coordinated, organized, right-wing messaging that is both mimetic in nature, but has the capacity to infiltrate left-leaning language, institutions, and has to coordinate a response, because the left, despite the fact that they're in power and have the institutional power, is the wonderful concept of the fact that they still have to play to the game of some sort of aspect of legitimacy, and appear to, be normal to sort of the middle America Democrat and the flyover state Democrat that votes for him, not necessarily just your urbanite. And I think that that's interesting. And I think that it could work. The question about organizing is whether the right will receive the absolute apocalyptic paroxysm of crackdowns that will ensue. Most likely, which is why an activist class, if it's going to do so, would need some sort of peer-to-peer network and not just exist on traditional social media means. Either that, or appear harmless enough within the establishment, right to exist, which is why I think Jack Posobiec is probably, like, I don't want to say he's our guy, but he's probably the best example that you could have of someone that, politically speaking, is probably relatively harmless, but at the same time actually knows how to get under the left skin. Organized political parties are inherently a left-wing power structure rooted in biological Leninism. Right-wing power structures rely on individualism, spontaneous order, marketplaces, tech, etc. Organized political parties are inherently a left-wing power structure rooted in biological Leninism. Right-wing power structures rely on individualism, spontaneous order from marketplaces. See, so, okay, Sean, I see where you're coming from. And so my response, I guess, Sean, would be that the right is such a catch-all term, right? And this is where I agree with Don the Pleb, where at this point in time, politically speaking, at least in the West, is that the right is pretty much anyone to the right of Mao. And so you have this catch-all where the right-wing power structure, you have distributists, you have integralists, you have neo-reactionaries, you have monarchists, you have minarchists, you have anarcho-capitalists, you have your normie Republican, you have, Christian nationalists. You have this wide catch-all thing to where some are not inherently individualistic, others who are far more collectivist in nature, some are more of your off-right types. So you have this variety where it's not just, inherently individualistic, although individualism, I think, is far more rooted in the right, because the right still holds a lot of the ideals that come from classical liberalism and the Enlightenment, which are not inherently bad either, especially with spontaneous order, form, marketplaces, tech, etc., like all the things that you mentioned. So, like, it is a catch-all, and I think that, it's important to realize that there are ways that I think that the right can also collectivize. And I think one of the greatest mistakes has been that our inability to be collectives has made it a lot easier for us to be disjointed, disunited, and have the right in general be infiltrated by the left. As Robert Conquest's third law of politics kind of reminds me that, always assume that any actions made by an organization is because it's being ruled by a cabal of its enemies. But yeah, I agree with you though. Telegram and Urban are two obvious examples. They're very anti-fragile. Although I'm still learning how to use Telegram. I follow people on Telegram. I follow a lot of people on it. I follow DC. I follow Neo-Occident. I follow Semiagog, and various others. But like, communication is difficult. I don't know how it works. I just know that it is sort of the go-to to follow people that are no longer on Twitter. Although I need to learn how to use Urbit. that's next. You can't infiltrate critical race theory as a straight white man, but you can infiltrate critical race theory as a super straight white man. You will be surprised by what types of reactionary shit you can push on lefties when you frame it in critical race theory. Yes, and I think that, not to give the horseshoe theory people any credit, it's a lot of fun stuff that you can push on to a lot of people. But I mean, at the same time, not to be completely, everybody is my enemy. It's just, there are stuff that there's overlap. I mean, when people like DC Perspective and Shoe on Head can both like Huey Long, no offense, DC, I'm just saying, like, we've both talked about him. Like, we can find meaningful overlap with these people. And I'm not saying that the Great American Divorce is something that I want, but at the same time, it can definitely happen. The Don the Pleb types and the NRX types are irreconcilable. Probably. Because I had a conversation with Don the Pleb about, engaging, getting politically involved, and, activism. And the Distributist had listed some lengthy comments talking about how these conversations, if they don't address certain issues, kind of feel moot, and all that we're doing is sort of just doing Republican politics, but, with more raw energy in it. And that's been like the biggest debate, right? Is that, I remember my first example, my first encounter with Don the Pleb is that Don made an appearance on Academic Agent Stream about strategy. And I know that Charlemagne and I think Settler's Lament were kind of on to him about, that voting is useless, political engagement is useless. And then everything that happened in November happened. And then all of the rallies happened. And they were all kind of united on this issue. And I thought that it was interesting, because it was like, we went from hating each other from these irreconcilable, irreparably different positions, and then they got back together on this thing. And then now that what happened, is over, what happened in January happened, and then Biden is in office, and it's kind of gotten back to where we were just like 6 months ago, to where the NRX crowd seems to be very much like voting is useless, getting politically involved in traditional means is useless, and all that we have to do now is just try and survive and hope that rogue elites can happen, as history has shown us, and then just try and make do with what we have and survive the coming long winter. And then you have the Don the Pleb types that believe that like traditional political engagement is still viable. And I think that the fundamental reason why these two positions are so irreconcilable is that you have Don in that crowd wants to work within the system. And that means working within the framework of liberalism, liberal democracy, and engaging within it. And then, of course, the NRX guys are like, we're completely done, and we're not interested in, engaging in those traditional routes, because obviously those traditional routes don't mean anything, because it's not really democracy, it's oligarchy, and it's a manipulation of procedural outcomes. Just look at what's happened in virtually every election since the beginning of the American Republic with Hamilton electors up until now. And so, like, they are irreconcilable positions. My position has always been, and that was my very first video, was talking about this very issue, was it is a two-front conflict. I think that the NRX people are right in the aspect that a lot of the things that are wrong with liberal democracy need to be addressed. And the way that you do that is that you have to build alternative institutions and provide an alternative means of government and provide a reason for people to hop on. You need to create alternative platforms, institutions, ideas, and systems that would encourage rogue elites to endorse them, invest upon them, and provide an alternative to the current shitty system. However, The only way that those things are ever going to get off the ground is if you have people that are willing to understand that they are going to fight on the other front, which is the current existing culture war and the current institutions and the current framework, and duke it out. And that's my position. And you need to have both, because you can't have one succeed without the other. You cannot have the people trying to build alternative platforms and institutions if there aren't people pushing back against the current bullshit right now from the cathedral in order to succeed. In the same way that if the people who are fighting the current culture war want to succeed, they're going to they need to make sure that people are building alternative platforms, institutions to recruit, foster ideals, so that the traditional mechanisms of how the right's ideas expand, which is their family, through ways that aren't necessarily conducive to how Blue America operates in spreading their ideas, which is far more, widespread and effective. That's how it is. And to me, that's the way that it's going to have to go forward. And that means, as Don, I think, has accurately said, is that the right wing would just need to come together and be like, listen, we agree on 85% of issues. The 15% we can stop worrying about until the existential threat is defeated. And the existential threat, as the NRX crowd is accurately identified, is woke techno-capital that has led to the atomization of people, has led to modernity, leading to people working to 80-hour work weeks that won't even take time off to go to the doctor because they're going to be replaced by some asshole with an H-1B visa, and that's where we're at. So clearly you need both going forward. And I don't think you need both, and that's the case. And my problem is that I think the problem that any sort of political movement of online populism or online political organization has, that I think Morgoth has talked about, is the issue of ego, the issue of clout, the issue of who gets to be in charge, and all that jazz. And I think that becomes a problem, and I think that's an accurate problem to come out, because who'd be willing to come in and have a meeting and actually talk about the issues, and who'd be willing to actually put aside the pissing contests and the rulers and put their things back in their pants and actually have a conversation. And I think that that's the important aspect, is that at the end of the day, humans are egotistical creatures. Humans are, we do have feelings that do, impact who we are. We are inherently emotional, and that it does play a role in political decision making. The NRX has been vindicated so much now, and everyone from Marco Rubio to Nick Fuentes has recognized the biggest threat is woke capital. Yeah, and I mean that's the issue. Woke capital is the problem, and I think that the right is kind of beginning to wake up and realize that. And I think one of my favorite things that Apex, who does his Apex notes on Substack, is just the right is the battered wife of capitalism. Don't get me wrong, free enterprise is great. Austrian economics is probably the way to go, but we are not living under a free market Austrian economic system, and that's the problem that we currently have. And so all that we're doing is that we are being a battered wife to this ideology of free markets, free enterprise, private property, and our ability to start our own businesses, that we are being destroyed by these conglomerates and robber barons that are the equivalent of the robber barons of the Gilded Era. And I'm sorry, those things were put in place by laws and manipulation of the system and encouraging, the lobbying of where we are now. It's very similar. And so, I do think that you need an era of trust busting and sort of, these things. And I think it was Robert Dugan who had said it on Twitter. He's another well-known South African poster who I enjoy following, saying the idea of Chesterton's, distributism of, culling corporate power can be achieved through private enterprise and loose regulations. These things can happen. It's just about having the will to do so and fighting back against the powers that be. But yeah, that's how it is. Oh, hey, Conscious Caracol, it's good to see you. I am looking forward to our chat next Tuesday. I am very much looking forward to sort of dropping white pills and telling people not to be discouraged. It'll be good. Sean says, okay, but the right won't organize in the same way the left organizes trade unions, political parties, activism. Organizing the right will require markets, cultural, generational institutions, etc. Yeah, Sean, like, I don't know how, if you're new to this channel or not, and if you are, welcome, but like one of the things I've been saying is that the biggest differences between a left-leaning young person and a right-leaning young person is that the left knows how to motivate young people to go out and actually vote and actually to go out and engage in the system, because the left has used high time preferences, spiteful mutants, and pretty much all these existential threats to encourage people to go out and knock on doors for their candidates. Whereas the right-leaning young person is more likely to spread, talk online, shitpost on Twitter, and have those conversations with communities online rather than engaging on the ground in person. And this is in part because a lot of people who are young and on the right are, I think, disillusioned when they actually go and engage on the ground. Because, who's your ideal young, right-leaning young person that actually goes out and does, like, the knocking on doors? Like Scott Presler, right? Scott Presler is a lot of things, and for better or for worse, one of the things that he does actually do is that he doesn't mind the fact that he's the youngest person in the room, because he's, like, what, 25? And, but he has no problem being the youngest person in the room. If anything, it works to his advantage. He has no problem talking to boomers. He has no problem talking to Gen X 50-year-olds who are, concerned about their kids. And that's fine. But one Scott Presler does not, equal the 50,000 college kids that are on Reddit, whether they're paid bots or not, saying they donated the last of their college, financial aid refund checks to Bernie's campaign, right? So you do have this difference. And so as someone who has been engaged on the local level, and as someone who has been talking about, telling people, here are the positions to run for, here are the positions that in your local communities that you should be looking out for, to me, it's incredibly accessible. The system is accessible, especially on those local levels, whether it's in your county or your city. So, I mean, there are ways to do it. I think that you just need to me, I think you need people on the right need to get over the psychological block of being a young person on the right. Alex P. Keaton is a meme from that TV show from way back then with Michael J. Fox. But like Alex P. Keaton to me is like kind of the way to go. Like a young guy who has no problem being with the conservative counterculture, and that's okay with me. But yeah, like to me, that would be the way to go. Malthus, do free markets really even exist? No, they don't, and probably we never will, but the closer that we can get to it, the better. And yes, Dan, you can have a spanner. Let's do that. There you go. We've added a spanner. But yeah, Bernie supporters paid their last pennies because they hope to get their debts canceled, by the way. They do. To me, it's the greatest scam. Like, we're going to do student debt forgiveness, and we're going to eliminate $50,000 in student loans. And this is what we're going to do because this is the system against the billionaire class. And then and then at the end of the day, no refunds. And that's how it works. And Bernie is the greatest grift known to man. And part of me thinks from his time in the Soviet Union when he did his honeymoon back in the 80s that I'm like, there's a part of me that just thinks, maybe this guy has been a part of the system, like just for a while. And like, that's the issue. And there we are. Melphis, I'm glad that your knee is feeling better. I didn't know that you were under the weather or you were injured, but I'm glad that you're feeling better. Better Bernie impression than Steven Crowner. Yes, Alex P. Keaton is an example of politics being downstream from the culture. Tom Cruise and Risky Business is another 1980s example because of the Thatcher-Reagan neoliberal revolution that had just started. Yeah, like I would like a modern day Alex P. Keaton of like a right-wing like teenager that quotes Mencius Moldbug or like quotes Nick Land. Like, give me that guy on TV where he's just like, yeah, I run a podcast and I'm on an image board, but I'm also like this like gym bro that reads Bronze Age Mindset, and I like have this like 2 anonymous Twitter accounts that gets retweeted by the president of the United States. Give me that version of Alex P. Keaton for the modern day. Oh, yes. And yeah, he is a power broker for the progressive bloc. That's Bernie's entire shtick right now, is that even though he got screwed out of the nomination twice, by every moderate candidate right before Super Tuesday, endorsing Biden and dropping out, and getting fucked over. The deal was made, right, that he would be, kingmaker for the progressive movement, and would pretty much essentially ideologically at least move the party in that direction. Have I finished Bronze Age Mindset? I've got about 50 pages left, and I went in totally blind. The only thing I knew about Bronze Age Mindset was that there is this concept of sort of like the Nietzschean Übermensch, and return to this, like, be free, find escape, lift weights. And that's all I knew. And so I was like, okay, this should be fun. And like, this should be a relatively organized book. No, it was not in any way, shape, or form. It felt like this bizarre 4chan green text with misspellings and grammatical errors everywhere, where I had to like reread a few things a couple of times on certain pages. I was like, what the fuck? Because it's just not put together completely and organized in a way that I would expect a traditional book to be. But it has been an absolute blast to read and to enjoy. So on the 20th, which is next Saturday, Clossington and I will be talking about it. So it'll be a fun conversation. It's been a fun trip so far. I look forward to finishing it. But let me go back to chat here. What's my opinion on the China issue, and whether they're a better option or the biggest threat? So, to implicitly advocate the Grug brain. So, okay. The China question, the CQ. Oh boy. So, my foreign policy perspective is that I am not a fan of my current form of government. I'm not a fan of the globalist American empire. However, between the devil I know and the devil I don't know, I'm going to choose the devil I know, because I think from internally there are politics and means in which you can create at least an alternative to the current system. I do think that China is a threat to the United States. And I think based off recent wargaming stuff that has been put out and about, I am incredibly worried about China's technological and economic capabilities. To me, they are a threat, and to me, they are a concern. And the biggest concern is that the CCP has been doing the same thing that the Soviet Union did during the Cold War, except far more effectively, which has been infiltrating institutions, buying out their problems, or buying out American politicians, and of course, infiltrating the American academic system through the use of Confucius centers throughout American problems everywhere. That's my concern. And they have done a very effective job at clamping down on religious, religion. And we can see that with the Uyghurs, whether or not, your position is that we should interfere or not. That's regardless of the point. They're cracking down on religion. They've had an issue with religion as far back as the Taiping Rebellion. And that's the issue, is that you're going to, clamp down on it. And that's the issue. However, I do think that the biggest assistance or support that the United States has and the West has in a civilizational sense is on demographics. Not because the United States and the Western world imports the third world for its population, creating the camp of the saints, but because China doesn't have the same existing social safety nets that the West does. It has an aging population. There's like 300 some odd million people, roughly the same population size of the United States that China has, that is over the age of 65. You have filial piety that exists over in China, which requires people to take care of them. So you have an overworked, overclocked population that still has to take care of their aging family and is expecting the same thing to happen, whilst not having children, whilst not getting married. You're going to have problems. And Alchi says it best in chat. China will crumble under its own aging population long term unless they start manufacturing babies or something. And unless that starts happening, you're going to have an issue there. China is both a better option and a threat. China is a better option in the way that you can have incredibly centralized and effective, government that actually gets things done. Both lefties and righties of all walks of life, I've noticed, can praise China on their ability to get things done. However, there's still a threat to the fact that, if these guys were to take over, the way of international system and trade that we've enjoyed for the last like 70 years of American hegemony goes away overnight. And I don't know if China has the capacity to enforce navally, the international system of trade that we all enjoy. So that would be a problem. America GloboHomo is irredeemable. A worse world would be one where there is no opposition to GloboHomo. The problem is, though, right, is that the question becomes, is China really in opposition to GloboHomo, or is China like propping up GloboHomo, knowing that GloboHomo will eventually collapse in on itself because that's the way that oligarchies and like liberalism works. And then you can just, be seen as the great liberator to those that we've seen oppressed. And I mentioned that yesterday. I think I replied to Jack Posobiec's tweet where it was just like, well, what will we do when we go to war with these people? And it's like, these people will be seen as liberators when, push comes to shove. Like, if the Chinese were to really go to war with the United States, I guarantee you that a sizable chunk of the American population would view China as liberators in the same way that like a lot of Polish people viewed the Nazis as liberators from the Soviet Union. Like that's what's going to happen. And I don't think I like that. And that would be my problem. And see, the thing is this, Dan, is that, yeah, they're building towns that resemble European cities. And there was an article that came out the other day, or not the other day, but it was a few weeks ago. And I don't remember where it was from, and I'm going to have to look it up. And I think I will. Is that it was talking about recycled white guys. And where is it? Yeah, here it is. It's from Reuters. And I'll share this with you so you guys can, we'll read along. So let me share my screen on this article. Good luck automating to replace 200 million workers. Share screen. Here. So yeah, this one, share. So this is the article. This was from at the end of last year in December. But this was from Reuters. Breaking views. China Inc. will recycle used white guys. And see, this is why I think that they're a threat and they're propping up GloboHomo, because it's just like, if we take the perspective of biological Leninism, right, the most fairly valued resource in the economy that isn't propped up by HR or woke nonsense is white dudes. So as we throw out the most like productive people, let me read the article, or is it not going to read it? Oh, well, that's bullshit. Okay, well, let me go find the article itself. Because that would be nice. Huh. Well, we'll find it in a second. I'd say China is a short-term threat and a long-term ally. Like, I'm not sure. Because at the end of the 1990s, you had this great debate over foreign policy establishment classes of your foreign affairs, your Council of Foreign Relations types that were saying, like, as China liberalizes, it will eventually democratize, and that ain't going to happen. They are snapping up older white men from especially in tech and trades. Oh, yeah. I have a good friend of mine. He's a few years older than I am. I think he's 28, 29 now. And he works for Raytheon. And he is the youngest person in his department. And it's just a bunch of old guys that are past their, mandatory retirement age. And that's where we're at. And those guys, he says, they get snapped up by foreign competition all the time because of their technical skill set. You throw in what's going on with this woke math stuff, and we're already having a problem when the next generation of civil engineers are doing 2 + 2 = 5. And you've got military engineers that had to reverse engineer our stealth bomber technology. It's ridiculous. We are getting closer and closer to sort of this loss of highly advanced technical knowledge that is only going to come back and bite us in the ass in a strategic sense. Throw on the fact that China has like a 90% market, share of rare earth minerals. We can't even afford to make enough materials for our fucking Xboxes and PlayStations, let alone our, missile guidance systems. Jonathan, what would they do with you? with your PhD in history? What would the CCP do with you? That's the real question. Dutton keeps going on about this. I like Dutton. The Jolly Heretic is one of my favorite people because I love his presentation. He is just such a fun guy to watch, and he's incredibly factual. Also, who wants to ally with liberal democratic China? If we want that, we'd be fine under American hegemony. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that we wouldn't want that, or it wouldn't happen. There's no way that China would liberalize. You don't have the cultural. They're not culturally fragile enough to be susceptible to liberalism, or in the last time that it was even attempted, right? Which would be, I would argue, the Taiping Rebellion, or even. Yeah, the Taiping Rebellion and maybe the Boxer Rebellion are the two most recent examples of sort of like attempting to liberalize China, and they failed. You have an incredibly anti-fragile culture, an uninterrupted 5,000 years, more or less, of civilizational history that makes it incredibly difficult for China to be, susceptible to any sort of Western form of regime change or ideological appeals. They don't have the means to do so. Which is why I think that was such a dumbass idea that, China will liberalize, the United States will have an ally in global cooperation, and we won't have to be the world's leading police power anymore. That was the biggest mistake. The real mistake, and I've talked about this on this channel and in other streams, is that the biggest mistake post-fall of the Soviet Union was that the United States went back on it, defaulted and reneged on its promises on NATO expansion, and making Russia feel like it would be, safe geographically. All that we did is that we advanced NATO, we advanced the European project all the way up to Russia's borders. We took away their buffer states. We took away Greater Russia from the Russians, which has historically been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And now, all of a sudden, you have now told the Russian government, post-Soviet Union, all right, we're now going to open up your borders to oligarchy. We are now going to open up your borders to people that are not going to have Russia's interests in mind. And we're going to make life absolutely fucking miserable for you. And so now, all of a sudden, you have a Russian government, one of the largest nuclear armed states, and still an incredibly powerful military force to be reckoned with, both geopolitically and strategically, is no longer oriented towards the West or towards the United States when it could have been. So now, one of America's largest potential allies against the growing threat of the Chinese is now more aligned with China than it will ever be with the West. And that was the greatest mistake at the end of the 20th century. And that's where we're at. The U.S. has rare earth deposits. The problem is the EPA rules make it impossible to extract here. That's why out of sight, out of mind with China and the Democrat neoliberalism was the political solution. Yes, and this is why I think one of the things that the Trump administration did right was actually changing EPA regulations for mineral extraction. And of course, that has been since then reversed. But yeah, lots and lots and lots of problems with that. The U.S. does have rare earth mineral deposits. We have vast resources on American soil, especially out in the West and the Midwest as well, that we don't utilize. Like most of the American, West is still owned by the feds. Like Nevada's 89% owned by the federal government. I guarantee you that the resources underneath that land are great to use. GSP asks, war with China in this decade. It's possible. AFK Orgnosky's power transition theory, in my opinion, makes it very likely and makes it almost all but certain. I'm going to pray for a political solution and an aversion to war. If anything, what will most likely happen is some kind of form of appeasement that will try best to do so. So the United States would most likely, especially under this administration, and if Kamala Harris is in power, you would see some form of appeasement geographically. I mean, but of course, the United States probably won't out of sheer technological and political hubris. So it's potentially likely. You have two options of managed decline, which leads to appeasement and greater Chinese expansion, or the war inevitably happens and things get bloody real quickly. Now Russia should not be our friend. We're GloboHomo. Russia is better off without us. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that I'm pontificating all these positions on foreign policy under the aspect that if things weren't ran by this completely paused system, but that's where we're at. Is that and my position, of course, is going to be that there are better ways to encourage international relationships and international cooperation, and I think the way that we've done it was a lot better when American culture wasn't just this hedonistic consumerism, and there was actually things that like were worth valuing. But we've long since passed that, and we are now what we are now, which is GloboHomo. But yeah, it is inevitable, most likely, and with how the Navy expansion is going, it's ridiculous. The whole rare earth mineral deposits make me think about the Outer Mongolian toxic lake in China that's ridiculously massive, and it keeps growing due to the West's silly save the environment pseudo scam. Yeah, because I mean, our green position and Western position, it means that the whole issue with Western environmentalism is that it is just not in my backyard. It's a bunch of NIMBYs. And we're just going to ensure that the third world suffers for it. Like, if you were to like see how fucked up the idea of recycling is with the West, look up e-waste in Africa, and you'll see how many thousands of people scour through old computers and cell phones to find rare earth minerals to recycle and throw out the rest, exposing them to cancer and other dangerous chemicals and materials that will inevitably get them sick and cause like reproductive problems, birth defects, etc. It's completely fucked. And that's the problem that I have with like American in Western environmentalism, is that it's just glorified not in my backyardisms. And, you know, the people that we claim that, you know, we're going to help develop are the people we end up fucking over. And that's my greatest problem with this white savior complex of green environmentalism. And that's what it is. It just inevitably hurts the third world. Your part about Russia reminded me of alt history, where Poland is ruled by right-wing monoparty with internal factions, occupies Lithuania with Russia, and starts an independent bloc of Middle Europe. You know, Ouchie, you know who else talked about that? George Friedman, of all people, in his book, The Next 100 Years, he was pretty much talking about how Poland is going to become a superpower and create sort of this Middle Europe bloc that is going to inevitably lead to another conflict in the Balkans. It's a hell of a read. China's war is explaining their PLA manual of unrestricted warfare. China will avoid kinetic warfare with the USA, but will undermine all of our institutions and political structures. Yes. And the other thing is that Xi Jinping in 2014 put out this huge report of like the Chinese government, and it was available for publication. I think I bought it back in my senior year of high school because it was like in Barnes and Noble, and it was like $25. And it was pretty much talking about how like our position is going to be that, you know, political subversion is a greater tool on the world stage by infiltrating institutions than it will ever be through hard power. This is why the Chinese soft power has been so effective. It's why they're the largest foreign direct investor in Africa. That's why you're seeing the new Silk Road initiatives. Like, these things work. As I have said with other content creators, is that the United States is a hard power nation fighting a soft power conflict with its greatest, you know, geopolitical opposition, which is the Chinese. And that's where we're at. Michael, you've missed a variety of conversations about TV shows, Moldebug essays, and now we're talking about China. We've been talking about China for a while. Have I read Yaki? No, I have not. Although I've been told to read, I think is the book is called Imperium, is what I should be reading. I've heard about it. He's on my list. So anytime that someone asks me if I read somebody and I haven't, they get added to the list. Odds are they'll be on my, they'll be on Prudent Reads. Let's take a look. Heck, it gets worse. The WHO does medicine tests in poor African countries as so to not get stopped by human rights or modern Western medical standards. Yeah, and that's partially why Bill Gates has such a nasty reputation, right? Is that a lot of his like polio vaccines that got tested in India caused polio outbreaks. And at least the Indian government has wised up to working with him now. But yeah, Imperium, yes. Okay, well then I will make sure to add it to the list, and it'll be on the poll for the next bit of Prudent Reads. My copies of Decline of the West came in, and I didn't expect it. I mean, they are some thick boys. Oh my god, both volumes are huge. So next month's Prudent Reads will probably be on volume 1 because holy fuck, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through both volumes for in a month. Those are some thick books. Skeptical Waves is an audiobook of Imperium on YouTube. I was just listening to Skeptical Waves' audiobook version of Nick Land's The Dark Enlightenment yesterday. So I have subscribed to him, so he's great. Yes, James Lindsay has been saying exactly that we are too woke with regards to woke SJW's political warfare. As Tim Pool appearance was gold. James Lindsay is great because he knows how to piss people off, and he also knows how to make spandrel and mold bug, writings and concepts digestible to normie conservatives. He's sort of the useful idiot of the neo-reactionary crowd. So, that works for me. Imperium, the history of philosophy and politics. Wonderful. Okay, so I will save that. Save that there. Should we try and undermine and disassemble the EU? So yes, because the European Union is organized Germanism by any other name, and that the EU is not good for the national sovereignty of people. As I was talking about, as I mentioned in my video yesterday, the European Union is a great example of deterritorialization. Because all you are doing is you are forcing countries to vote and vote and vote and vote and vote and vote until you get Merkel's way, or until you get the Germans' way, or until Brussels get what they want. You are undervaluing the cultural values and traditions of the ethnic peoples of all these various countries. The European Union needs to go. It's got to go. The EU must be destroyed. Merkel delenda est. EU delenda est. Brussels delenda est. End of discussion. It's got to go. The EU needs to go. It is a failed experiment. The fact that they tried their fucking hardest to make Brexit as long and as painful as possible to be some sort of cautionary tale to other Eurosceptic countries and leaders is indicative of the fact that the EU is a terrible, terrible thing. It needs to go. End of discussion. EU must be destroyed. The fact that Nord Stream 2 will be finished this year and there's no pipeline from the Persian Gulf to Europe in the future tells you a lot. Yeah, absolutely. But I wonder if humanity is to colonize space, geographic blocks may be inevitable. I think so. I think the fact that despite their desire to, despite our desire that we have these ideas, like Star Trek, right? Like despite this idea of this universalist, liberal, post-scarcity, commie state, like that'll never happen. I mean, hell, even in DS9, it's like 500 years in the future after the end of civil rights, but fucking Captain Sisko is still going to bitch about racism from the 1960s. If Captain Sisko in the year like 2350 something is going to complain about racism of the 1960s, there's no way in hell we are ever going to have some sort of great unified Earth government that is going to rule the stars collectively. We are going to have nation states of various countries and sizes competing for resources in geographic blocks in space. That is inevitable. I'm sorry. Like all these ideas of these unified Earth governments like the UNSC and Halo or whatever, they're not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so that's how it is. And end of discussion. Because if Captain, Benjamin Sisko is going to bitch about 1960s racism in the year 2300 something, then yeah, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. But yeah, useful idiot implies that we're trying to screw him over. We should use the term unknowing ally instead. Yeah, that could work, except for the fact that I kind of do want to screw him over because I just wish that he would, at least acknowledge where he's getting his theories on. But he's like, no, liberalism can be preserved. We can save the system, even though the very system I'm trying to preserve is how we got here in the first place. Like, you're so close, but so far. Whoops. Earth will become a museum world, and every government will move their seat of power to man-made structures. Anyone who will try to bomb anything on Earth will be instantly marked for extermination. Simple as. Poland has like a 7-vote forced on it in a few months. Poland so far has said it every time with an 80% majority, yet the EU has made them vote, vote eight in a few weeks from now, just to give an example. Yeah, they've done this with other countries as well. I think back in the late 90s, they made Denmark vote like 6 or 7 times on a specific policy issue until they got it right. That's my problem, is that this form of transnational legalism has essentially ensured that the legal sovereignty of the people, who under a democratic system is supposed to have the sovereignty of the people represented within their own national government, no longer has that. I mean, hell, wasn't that the biggest complaint out of Brexit in the first place, was that like 68% of the UK's laws weren't even passed by their own fucking parliament anymore? That's the problem with the EU, is that you as the average citizen have no mechanism of recourse now, and some asshole in Brussels that votes on like 20 pieces of legislation in 5 minutes is going to be at that point. But I mean, at least Poland is doing everything that they can. And didn't they have that MEP on the other day saying, if you come to our country, it's your fault if the cops deport you and beat the shit out of you? Like, Poland is just a special place. Love them. But I will be right back. I'm going to get a drink, so give me 1 second. And we're back. Okay. I had to get some cranberry juice. My throat was killing me here. Hi, Mongoose Man. Glad that you could stop by. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing great. Glad that everyone is enjoying themselves and having a good time. But, all right. I think it's time for some more frogs. We'll find some more. But yeah, like, so he was an MP, not an MEP. Even better, because that means that he has more control over what's going on in their government. Okay. More frogs. Let's go. Romania is the ultimate enlightened centrist country. Nazism and communism are both illegal, so everyone is based in corruption. JKM postulated flat tax on all refugees to found police units, made the most aggressive ones to keep the others in check back when there were still refugees coming from Bosnia. Oh, that was some time ago, wasn't it then, huh? But yeah, what a time to be alive. And like, what was it? I was having a conversation with someone, I think it was Apex yesterday, while I was sitting in while I was at a diner, just, reading through Twitter and enjoying some chicken and waffles. And it was just like, I don't even necessarily agree with like everything that comes out from like Curtis Yarvin's mouth, but like at the same time, I'm reading up on everything from everybody, because like if you were to ask me what my politics were a year ago, it was nothing what it is now. And, not to say that there's some sort of like normie conservative NRX pipeline, but there's definitely something out there. And I blame the YouTube algorithm, believe it or not, because I was listening to, I think it was either Styx or Sargon, who are relatively within the Overton window, right, of normal conservative like discourse of right and left, because, Styx is a libertarian, and Sargon, I don't know what you can call him, because he's moved to the right over the last like 6 years since he started his YouTube channel and now what he does now. But I mean, I had a video come up on the algorithm that was recommended from the Distributist. And it was a relatively recent video from the Distributist. It was his grill pill video and his observations on Chapo Trap House. And I listened to it and I was like, holy fuck, this guy's great. And I was like, this guy like is incredibly intelligent and like the kind of right-wing like commentator that I really enjoyed. And then I just binged almost everything that he had like put out in like a short period of time. And I was like, oh, well, like I listened to the Distributist, and then I was like, then it was Charlemagne, and then it was Settler's Lament, and then I mean, I had already been familiar with Academic Agent because of Sargon, so I'm just like, this is where I fit in. And then I started listening to everything that Charlemagne had done on Moldbug, and then everything that he had written on Nick Land, and then BioLenin, and this is where I'm at. So there's the lib-right to author-right political racing track is incredibly true, and it only goes in one direction. It doesn't turn around. So yeah, like my politics has been this radical, like I moved from a blue city to a rural part of the country in this rural red state, area, to where it went from, and I think Michael just said it best, base libertarian to reactionary pipeline. And that's exactly how it was, because I went from hardcore staunch libertarian. I was a Rand Paul supporter in the 2016 presidential primaries here in the US. And then bam, I have gone, more leaning towards the NRX stuff, that kind of stuff. Is a social liberalist who's even slightly more conservative nowadays, even if he thinks Shapiro is based. I mean, he's self-described as a social liberalist. I mean, he's definitely moved to the right over the last several years. He is the peak. What's the word I'm looking for? Just like, he is the best example of like a Gen X dad who is just like, yeah, Ben Shapiro guy is all right, but he could do a little better on X, Y, and Z. Like, I laugh every time I hear Sargon say, like, I still think Tucker Carlson, man's got a chance, or that elections are still worth participating in. And I'm like, guys, we live in an occupied country. Like, we have a green zone inside the American Capitol. We've got problems with, crime that doesn't get addressed. We have riots that were state-sponsored. Our elections were fortified. I mean, they always have been. But, like, holy fuck. Like, traditional mechanisms of political engagement are no longer an option. And yet you see people like Ben Shapiro and others that are, like, so hard on, ready to go for, like, well, we will get them next time. They've gone too far. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, you got to be kidding me. Here we are. Dormant Dynasty, Settlers, Laurent, Aaron McIntyre, The Distributist, AA, So, me, and other channels, including you. Yeah, like, for me, I got introduced to Aaron and Settlers Lament from streams with The Distributist. That's how I also was introduced to the Franklin and Endeavor. There's some really great guys. I thoroughly enjoy them. I will need to start looking into Dormant Dynasty. Are the two most base Chinese lads you will ever experience? Yeah, I'm going to have to do that. Yes, the accurate mindset is to think of yourself in the Soviet Union and the corporate press as the Pravada. Yep, I agree. Imagine believing that Tucker Carlson... and here's the thing, right? Is that... Kiwi Bear on Twitter said it best. I don't give a fuck what Tucker Carlson has to say after being silent virtually from November to January 6th. After not saying a goddamn word about what happened during the election and all the shady shit that happened to keep his job. Like, I'm sorry. Like, clearly you're in it for the money and you're clearly in it for your career and not your movement. So, like, not my cup of tea. Like, I'm sure Tucker Carlson is nice when it comes to the culture war, but he's not my guy. Time for another frog. There we go. Another frog. Ugh. I don't blame him for that, though. There are always three factors in a coup or power play: one, the conspirators, and two, the established regime. So what's the third one? And three, those looking to whoever is going to win. Tucker's in the third category. Yeah, the frog looks like a protester. Bioamphibianism. See, like the real, it's not return to monkey, it's return to frog. Don't return to monkey, return to frog. The frog looks like a protester. Well, I'm sure he's protesting, you know? pH levels in the water's too high. Gotta protest. Quit turning the frickin' frogs gay. That's why he's protesting. Quit turning the frickin' frogs gay. That's his it's on his leaf. That's what he's protesting about. But yeah, so that was one thing that was on my mind lately, was just sort of the nature of how things have been going. Like I complain about how the system is like, I think the traditional engagement is virtually useless, but at the same time, that is kind of contradictory to my whole point about how like you need to build alternative institutions, but you also need institutions and people that are willing to fight the current system. And so there are people that are out there currently building their own institutions and building their own things, and I'm all for it. So like we make fun of Sargon, right? But like Sargon is one of the greater Anglo examples of building his own institutions. For better or for worse, the Lotus Eaters is a really great example of what we've got for an alternate institution. It's a popular, top 10 podcast over in the UK. Clearly, he's doing something right for a guy that can make 5 figures a month, and he's doing well for himself. So at the very least, there are people that are going out there and are building alternative institutions, and I'm all for it. And I mean, even with the America First guys, I don't agree with everything that the Groypers have to say, but holy hell, at least Nick Fuentes is going out on the ground and is actually building up his platform, building up his PAC, building up his foundation. He is doing all the things that you need to make something out there for you to recruit, facilitate, network, and grow. Now, the question of whether or not he's a Fed or not is a totally different story, and I don't know enough about that to engage in that conversation. But at least you are doing everything you need to do in order to go out there and build. And I think that's what you need more than anything. The shit libs always said that Sargon was a right-wing gateway, but I mean, the shit libs were right. They're not wrong though. And this is what I find kind of funny, because like throughout college, I was your very normie, grew up in a conservative household, had normie conservative views. I liked Rand and Ron Paul. And who did I listen to on YouTube during college? I listened to Sargon, I listened to SFO, and I listened to Styx. Those were my 3 people that got me through college. And then all of a sudden, I listened to who Academic Agent was because he was on Sargon's stream. And I was like, this is my kind of guy. And so I started listening to Academic Agent. And then I listened to Charlemagne, AA, and all these other people. And here I am now. So, like, they're not wrong at all. And, like, the shit libs were absolutely right that he's a right-wing pipeline. And I'm A-okay with that. The problem with Fuentes' style is that it's too open. It is just a nail for the regime to hammer down. There's no glory in pointless defeat. Yeah, I mean, they are open about it, and I think that, like, but I mean, well, I think I said this with Don a few months back, was just like, at least, I'm for the position of, we need sort of the shotgun strategy of throwing things out there and seeing what sticks. And like we make fun of Sargon for the whole open letter shtick, But at least Sargon will put out like 50 dumb ideas, and if at least 2 of them work out for something, then hell, there you go. Like, and he did that more in his internet blood sports days when he was trying to be like, these guys are the real racists, or these guys are the real liberals, or whatever. Like, he would try all these different strategies and just see what would work, seeing what would stick. And, you know, the great manlet of Swindon managed to at least figure out a couple of things and get a couple of burns in. And, you know, by the end of the 2016 election timeframe, the guy had figured out more or less a decent strategy to go forward. And the greatest guy who would document all this, ironically, was the distributist. Can I just say that AA's slow slide from classical liberal to reactionary has been such a fun slide down the black pill slide? Yeah. So my position, though, with all that, though, and I think Clossington had a really good thread of that on Twitter, was that you can have the decline view of, like, the long decline of history is sort of like a traditional reactionary viewpoint, but, like, there's no point in being black-pilled. And I am of that position, that you can view things from the perspective of historical decline, but there are better ways to go about dealing with that issue. And so, to me, I think that being black-pilled isn't necessarily essential. AA does say he is a classical liberal, and he says that he always will be. And I think that's due to the fact that his position has always been that, like, economics, the same thing with, I think, Per Byland and others in Jay Green River, is that you can adhere to an economic system, but an economic system is nothing without a moral code behind it. And I think that's the reason why he claims he's still a classical liberal. Mongoose Man asks, thoughts on BAP? Well, Mongoose Man, you should stop by next Saturday, because we're going to be going over on Prudent Reads number 3. I do a little book club book review every month, and the audience and the community gets to pick the book. And this month's book was Bronze Age Mindset by BAP. So you get to hear my thoughts on BAP and the book and everything that he's been doing next Saturday. So you'll get a really great opportunity to hear my thoughts then. Yeah, he says he's a classical lib guy, but honestly, he's more reactionary than most people on the right these days. Yeah, I mean, his Ashes of Civilization series is just peak reactionary content, in my opinion. And one more frog. There we go. Nick Land's critique on the nature of capital is very hard to refute. Yeah, Nick Land's The Dark Enlightenment does a really good job at sort of outlining the issues with capital and how it inevitably leads to, like, oligarchy. Caesar was once captured by pirates, and he returned to crucify them all. He didn't let that get them down. Don't let a lefty on Twitter get you down either. Well, don't get banned off Twitter either. I hate all these Twitter bans because it's just irks the hell out of me, because all these good posters are gone. But frogs are gay or super straight. The frogs are super straight unless they've been affected by GloboHomo and then they become gay. So that's why we need to conserve the frogs. Conserve all the frogs, because if not, we're going to lose all of our super straight frogs. Super straight frogs are an endangered species, and we must save them. I kind of want to get banned, Twitter, although Twitter is kind of a time sink. It is. And I like Twitter because Twitter allows me to do rank punditry. Because if you've noticed on my channel, I try to avoid rank punditry. I try to avoid talking about current event issues on stream. Although on occasion I'll do like a foreign policy stream with DC Perspective and guests. But I try to avoid rank punditry because I'm like, oh, I can just put my thoughts on or do a shitty hot take on Twitter and I don't have to do a video on it. Or, I mean, if I want to talk about current events and rank punditry, it's what Monday Morning Musings is for, right? Because it's like I can just get my thoughts out and then we're done. And that way I can spend my scripted videos on, non-wank punditry kind of crap and just do something else. and go forward and talk about concepts, philosophy, and things that I'm reading and so on. Twitter is a time sink, but it also allows me to do the rank punditry I don't do on this channel. Because, I did competitive speech and debate. One of the events in competitive speech and debate in the United States is this event called extemporaneous speaking, where you're given a question on current events, whether it's domestic issues or foreign policy, and you're given 30 minutes to provide an 8-minute or 7-minute speech. And you're supposed to answer the question with news sources, magazines, theory, articles, etc. And I did that for 8 years. So if you were to give me a question on how does Israeli basing rights in Azerbaijan affect Israeli-Iranian relations? And I'm like, cool, give me 20 minutes and I'll give you a 7-minute presentation as to how that question can be answered with, sources, journals, magazines, etc. That's rank punditry, right? I'm very good at rank punditry, but there's a million other channels with rank punditry out there. So why the hell would I bother? And at the same time, why would I bother talking about rank punditry in a foreign policy perspective when the foreign policy of the United States is woke techno-capital and GloboHomo? I don't want to be the guy that defends that or talk about, here's what GloboHomo should do because I'm never going to get fucking listened to. So what's the point? So I'm with Melphis on this one. Rank punditry is a lot of fun, which is why Twitter's a great place to be. That's why I try to avoid doing videos on it because it's there's a million other channels that do rank punditry. And if I really wanted to do it, I could easily, turn on a camera and I could do the whole Steve Turley thing and talk about why you shouldn't be blackpilled. And here's what we're going to do. And here's why the United States is the greatest thing ever. And 1776 will happen again. Buy my book. And here we go. But if that's the case, just go watch Steve Turley, not me. Because I like to think I offer a little more insight than what Steve Turley does by shilling his shit for 5 minutes and going from there. And that's where we're at. But yeah, so that's my long rant about rank punditry, is that I'm good at it, but I want to avoid it because I feel like there's a million other channels that do it. Frogs break the line between land and water animals. Extremely chaotic. Chaotic but good. Return to frog. Do not return to monkey. Return to frog. There need to be more history channels. I really enjoy History Bro. I really enjoy Praise of Folly. And then there's a couple of others. Actually, I'm going to open up my subscriptions now on YouTube, and I can tell you who I enjoy. Because there are some good history ones. Let's see here. I also enjoy Styx for his occult video stuff because that stuff's always good. But I know Applied Virtue does some stuff there. Praise of Folly does some history stuff. History Bros pretty great. Endeavor on occasion has done stuff on history, but and then of course Jonathan Pohl, who's in the chat, who's done some really great great work, and his work on bio-Stalinism has been fantastic. So I mean, you got to just find him. But I mean, History Hustle, there you go. There are a lot of really excellent history channels, and all of them complain about being demonetized. And they always get demonetized because they're talking about, no things, or at least according to YouTube's algorithms, that you're not allowed to talk about. I mean, hell, even the most normie history channel out there, the guy who did the Great War, half his stuff got demonetized because of what he's talking about and referencing. Dova Hattie is by far, in a way, the best history channel. Well, consider me subscribed. I just saw that. Michael, the Prudentialist demolishes the French Revolution, heralds a new Burkean age. Oh, no. No, I don't want a new Burkean age. Burkean incrementalism is how we got here. Burke is such a mixed bag because Burke is just inherited rights. The social contract does not go away after you die. You have no right to change it because they're children, and everyone who hasn't been born is a part of this, this contract. And he's like, Rousseau got some things wrong, but at the same time, incrementalism is the way to go. But then I'm thinking to myself about what John Doyle said in his recent video, where he's just like, apathy towards incrementalism inevitably results in absolutism, and that's where we are now. So I'm like, Burke is right on some things, but Burke got a hell of a lot of things wrong as well. So I'm just mixed on that sort of issue. Burke is cringe. Guy with a Burke profile picture, lol. I didn't say Burke is cringe. It's just like Burke is like 50-50, where Burke is right half the time and right and wrong half the time. Like Burke is just like, human beings are too complex, and there's not one unifying theory that can make us understand things. And I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, I also like buy into like Moldbuck's concept of the cathedral, which is sort of this overarching theory of how power operates in the West. And so I'm like, well, Burke probably didn't think about how paused things would be in the future. So, but at the same time, Burke is right in the essence of, inherited rights, that social contracts do exist. Societies need to recognize tradition and respect the past in order to preserve their posterity. So there's a lot of things that he gets right as well. So it's like, do I think I'll stick with a profile picture? I probably will for the time being. To be honest, what I really want to do in the future is that I kind of want to find a guy on Fiverr or something and get a artist depiction of like what I look like without necessarily like showing my face. Sort of like how the Distributist has the sort of, sketch image version of him in a nice like bow tie or whatever. I kind of want to do something like that. So A, you kind of have an idea of what I look like, and B, I'm not necessarily reliant on, an Edmund Burke profile picture. So that's something to consider. I might do that in the future. Styx is pretty bad at times, though. His hot take is on like real Satanism has never been tried, when he was roasting about how Christians in the U.S. South having been correct. And see that, to me, my biggest issue with Styx is his sort of like his atheism. And I get it, right? If you want to be an atheist, that's fine. I'm not. I will proselytize, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to force you with a gunpoint or anything to convert. But it's just like, he's also not a Satanist anymore. And like Styx has been on this fun journey of like, I'm a Satanist and like Christians suck and rah, like. He's sort of that Obama, Jon Stewart era lefty, to where he is now this like pretty good libertarian. So it just happens. Slamming prots is not only a pleasure, but a duty. The interdenominational infighting, to me, is someone who is coming back to the faith and is coming back to Christianity. To me, the interdenominational thing, I like to look at it in a sort of cutesy, fraternal way. Like, oh, like look at it. They're like brothers that don't get along. But at the same time, I'm like, guys, this is cringed. Like, I follow Settler's Lament on Twitter, and I see a lot of like cursed Protestant nonsense stuff getting retweeted. But at the same time, I also follow cursed papist nonsense, and I get to listen to both sides sort of, duke it out over their issues on scripture and the saints and the aspect of how to deal with Mary. And it's just like, oh my God, I don't have enough energy to be invested in this, although I probably should, because, we all die one day and I should be more concerned about my soul and my well-being. But it's like, it's cringe. It's perfectly balanced nonsense. Like, yeah. Atheism and Protestantism is cringe. Return to the Orthodox Church and heal the Great Schism by conquering Rome in the name of the saints. This is a conversation that oh no, religious debate. Oh no. But yeah, perfectly balanced nonsense. That's a good way to look at it. Atheism is the big cringe. It's also the big gay. Atheism is the big gay. You should care about these things, but this isn't the way to learn more about them. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. And like I had said earlier on stream, Mongoose Man, I don't know if you were here for it, but I was I've been. It's been a long journey in the last year now of coming back to Christianity, and I've been every Sunday I go to a different church. There's 3 churches that I've been kind of in regular attendance to, which has been a Baptist church, an Eastern Orthodox church. It's an actual parish of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and then a Catholic church. It's in a local town near me. So it's been a fun time of just going in between 3 different, churches. But I mean, it's not that bad. It's just I've been learning more about all that jazz. The Christianity purity spiral stuff that I see on Twitter and that I see between the Catholics that I follow and others that I follow. It's just very interesting. And I chuckled with Aaron McIntyre a long time ago. I was like, this NRX thing feels like a really weird Catholic church psyop, because everyone that I've been meeting in the NRX crowd seems to be these like really trad Cath guys, except for Aaron himself, who's a Baptist. And he's just like, oh, well, like, here we are. But that's how it is. All right, Mongoose, man, I appreciate it. Thank you. And all the churches around me are whack, subverted to hell, very off-putting. Mine are not, but that's thankfully because I live in a rather red area and people still give a shit about their churches and their neighborhoods and their communities. So it's been a fun time. And it's been fun and just enjoying and appreciating the fact that regardless of their denominations, these people still care about their faith. They still care about their neighbors. They still care about their communities and their schools. So things are not as paused. And I mean, the schools are still paused, but they're not as paused as, say El Paso or any other major city that I used to live in. Insert anti-papist U.S. propaganda picture here. Oh no, not the anti-JFK stuff. Oh no. But yeah, like it's been a fun time. That goes back to Rothbard's Folkways analysis in the progressive era. As Catholics and German Lutherans reject the do-good works, progressivism of other Protestant denominations. Well, yeah, way older than JFK. I'm just being facetious there. Yeah, the anti-papist attitudes has been it's probably something that you could psychopathologize as being a part of the American culture and understandings that Americans have been inherently anti-papist just due to its New England roots. But yeah, so this is it's been a good time so far. Where we're at 2 hours. I got a little more time. So is there anything else that I've missed lately in the news other than just tracking what's been going on with everything domestically? Just trying to see what else has been going on. Because it just feels like with the world, things just seem a little slow. News-wise, it feels, just because the Biden administration is exactly as shitty as we thought that it would. Your tax dollar. Prudentialist, do you think atheism is the source of GloboHomo? Ooh. Tax dollars are going to OnlyFans girls' stimulus checks. Am I a simp? No, you're not a simp because taxation is theft. So if anything, you're being robbed. And your money is being forcefully stolen and put in the pockets of e-girls. And Nick is right. No e-girls. No e-girls. He's right there. But do I think atheism is the source of GloboHomo? I think atheism is a significant contributor of GloboHomo because once there is atheism is a byproduct though of liberal secularism. So you get religion out, right? Religion is no longer an aspect. There's going to be a separate line between church and state fine. And there's a reason for that, because of course the United States, in that aspect of the separation of church and state, is that we don't need a Church of England. We don't need the state to have the ability to tax churches and to have the ability to use the power of the pocketbook and the military and the press to determine how you should worship. Fine. However, the separation of church and state, therefore, by extension, culturally becomes a sort of de facto, and now by extension de jure, separation of church and state, to where now secularism leads to atheism, which leads to sort of this spiritual power vacuum. And what inherits the power vacuum is sort of the woke GloboHomo that we know now. So I would really, it goes to liberal, it's really liberal secularism. So really liberalism is sort of the cause of GloboHomo, which is why I think the neo-reactionaries are right to criticize liberalism every chance that they get, because it's like, hey man, like these mythologized ideas of like enlightened neutrality and of institutions and people, that's sort of our root cause of these problems. Although root cause debate is inherently, counterproductive, because there's never really just one root cause of a problem. But yeah, it's political theology. The state replaces God as the universal, as the universal lawgiver and actor of righteousness and justice. And that's where we're at. And that's the thing, is that, and that's the thing that I think a lot of progressives fail to realize, or is that they are so adamantly anti-Christian or anti-theist, yet they are engaging in theistic practices within their own ideology. Why? Because humans, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, are inherently teleological and, creatures. We are inherently spiritual. We are inherently looking for the assignment of a higher power and a higher duty. Whether that is a system of belief, whether it's animism, whether it's Christ, we are inherently a spiritual, being. And there's always going to be a power vacuum of teleology and spiritualism, especially when you get rid of the faith. If you get rid of Christianity, okay, there's going to be something that takes up the volume. There's going to be something that takes up the power vacuum. That's what we're seeing now with GloboHomo. And that's where we're at. Atheism is lobster energy. Theism is frog energy. That's right, Dan. Absolutely. Which results in Gibbs without responsibility to family, community, and nation. Roger Geist, it's like when people treat prayer like a wishing well. Why do anything to help yourself when you can just vote and pray for a higher power to give it to you? Is this on relating to our... Oh, okay, I'm now caught up now with the chat. Gotcha. Okay. Melphis says, why is paganism even a thing in the Americas? It's so cringe. The only place where paganism is okay is if you're in Lithuanian, go home and kill commies in the wood with your SSO. In part because, again, when there's a power vacuum, something's going to come up there. That's why, I blame the new agey hippies, where they're like, oh, Wiccanism and paganism, like we're all these spiritual beings with our crystals and looking towards the stars. And then, of course, there's the sort of like inverse of that, where it's like, nope, I am a son of Odin. I am like a white supremacist, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, like there's no happy escape from this. Just go back to God. I'll have you know we are God-fearing crustaceans. Oh, yeah, that was a Jordan Peterson joke there. So what you're trying to say is that we should really just be all like lobsters. And it's like, no, Channel 4, no. All right, last frog of the day. Unorganized religion is worse than organized atheism. That's probably true. Lib public rituals all tend in the same negative direction. Yeah, that's how you get struggle sessions. Yes, camouflage. JP shall not tarnish my pinchy people. It's okay. Great White Lobster will make you an honorary frog. It's okay. You have a frog pass. You have an amphibian pass. You've got an F-word pass with all the frogs. But with that being said, I appreciate you all coming out to just chat and hang out for a little bit. I'm going to walk the dog here in just a few minutes, and then I'm going to record a Monday morning musings. I will have it premiere tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So I'll let you guys all check in for that. But I appreciate you all stopping by. So it's been a good time. Before I head off, is there anything else that you all want to talk about or go over? Well, thanks for stopping by, Sean. I greatly appreciate it. And before I head off, I'm just going to... Internet drains your energy like a spider drains flies. Probably, yeah. Well, before I head off, I will definitely shill for a minute here. So I do have a Subscribe Star profile. So here you are. I don't post on it as often as I should, although I am thankful for Dan Normie's incredible and generous support. So I'm thankful for that. And of course, if you like this kind of stuff, I would greatly appreciate sharing it. I want to get to 1,000 subscribers in the next month or so. That way I can do community posts. That way I'm not reliant on just Twitter posting to let people know about my subscribers and all that jazz. So I think that would be helpful in the future. For the last couple of things here, dispensationalists are definitely the worst of the worst. And do you think we should teach evolutionary theism in schools? I think it should be an option. I think, however, that we should probably focus on what is considered the established, repeatable scientific method. I'm not here to get into the whole Scopes trial again, but if it's an option and people want to learn about it, I don't think that should stop them. But at the same time, I'm an advocate for homeschooling. So if that's something that you want to teach your kids, by all means, go for it. But thank you all for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it. I will probably try and do these things a little more often now that I've got some time, and now that I actually have internet up at my place, because I used to live out in the middle of nowhere and internet was a hard thing to come by, but we set up the tower and now we have it. So I'll see you all next time. And of course, I will have a Monday morning musings out for you all tomorrow morning. I'll have some scripted stuff out soon. Prudent reads next week. And I will link out on Twitter for my live stream appearances this Tuesday and Thursday. Be prudent, everybody. I'll see you all next time.